Hello. It's gonna be me and Mr. Duncan Williams, and welcome to Crosstalk Podcast. Usually we have David and Joe, but both of them are out of town. And today we're going to talk about what's going on locally, because our community is a very important part of our church, and that's one thing that, in my opinion, we need to work more on this community, because we work on them, but we don't really we don't outreach as much as we should and could, in my opinion. And that goes. It's not only talking about other people, but it's also myself. I feel I need to actually do more outreach to the communities.
Well, I think the good news with that is that there's opportunity, and I think with the way these issues swirling on around us in the world that are affecting our communities, that are more macro issues or issues that other churches have gone through that we're soon to be in the midst of going through now, or any other thing. Is that there's an opportunity for us to go forth and approach it from an optimistic viewpoint, that we can move forward and affect things in a positive way to serve the Lord better. And that's our mission as a church, and to serve the Lord and to serve our neighbors.
It is, and a lot of times in our community itself, we have PCO, which is Putnam Christian Outreach. They do a great job of reaching out to the lower income poverty families. They also reach out to the community because they have a church that's also partially tied in with them.
Yep.
So that they reach out. But like our local church, we have missions that reach out. We had the prayer shawl ministry. We had the prayer warriors. We send a lot to PCO, which is outreach. But how much personal one-on-one outreach do we have in our communities?
Well, I mean, I think there are members of our church that are heavily involved in that, and I know that Rex is involved with the Putnam Christian Outreach, where they're actually part of delivering food to people and feeding the hungry, and that's certainly something that Christ calls us to do.
Oh, yeah.
And I know that he's involved with some other ministries that are not necessarily organized within our church, but we have members of our church who are doing those, and I think that's something, when you talk about this outreach, that we can use those other organizations where we're not having to reinvent the wheel, but we can join with other Christians in serving the Lord. And so, I think there's different ways to think about it. When we say we can do more, we don't have to do it all on our own. We don't have to have a little center within the Eatonton First United Methodist Church. We can have members of our church who are involved in doing that, and that's really how we can all be involved in our ministry.
Oh, yeah. And so that's one thing with, like, our youth group. Around Christmas time, your son and your daughter went with us, and you and your wife also went with us. We went around Carolyn to the neighborhood around the church. And
I should have been arrested for disturbing the peace, but I tried to sing quietly in the back. But
oh, yeah. I was in the back with you. But yeah, it touched so many people, and like Miss Legenia, that made her night. Was just, being able to have somebody come and say, we love you. And it could be just as simple as outreach, just as we go to the grocery store, say,
Well, it made my night seeing her, because she's such I have such great respect for her, and she's a pillar in an institution
oh, yeah.
of this town and of this church. So it was nice to make that connection and to do it, with the emblem.
Yeah.
I think that was fun. It
Oh,
was
yeah.
fun, and it's fun just to go sing Christmas carols.
Oh, yeah. And see, that's one of the outreaches we can do is just something simple like that. We can write cards. There's so many outreaches we can do within our community, and like you said, we can also team up with other churches, other community organizers. PCO is one of the big organizers here in Putnam County, but you also got Service League that we're also working together with them to do some Easter stuff.
Right.
And it's just different things that we can do to help out. There's so many different organizations.
Our church supports the Scouts.
That is true.
So there's some intersection between those organizations, but they do good things, but they need local support. And I think that's involved in serving in those organizations, and we're also members of the Methodist Church. I think that those things are potential draws to the Lord.
Right.
While we're not exactly, I guess, supposed to be, wearing that hat, or so to speak, within the Scouts or within all these organizations. You're taking yourself with you wherever you go, and certainly,
Oh yeah.
we hope that wherever we go, that people know that hopefully it becomes obvious that we're Christians.
Well, see, in Boy Scouts, they actually have a badge that they can earn. Well, it's a pin. It's God and Country. See, like Boy Scouts was originally based on a Christian outlook. It had military background too, but it also had a lot of Christian base in it.
Yeah.
And they still had a God and Country pin that they can actually earn.
Yeah.
By going to church and talking about God, and they actually had to sit down and actually write a paper about what Christianity and God means to them.
Oh, that's very good.
I was talking to a Boy Scout leader a couple of days ago, and I actually asked him if they still do that, and he's like, "Yeah, that's one of the biggest things that boys are trying to get into now." But there's so many, and we're talking about the boys in this troop. There's so many that are unchurched. How do we reach out to the youth of the community and draw them in?
I think we need programs, and it's lots of times it's a chicken or the egg thing, or a Field of Dreams thing. If you build it, they will come. That takes some faith on the part of the church, and also we have to treat it as an investment, and like investments, we expect some positive return on that. So I think there are things that we can do through encouraging volunteerism, selecting the right people, and then children want to invite their friends.
Oh yeah.
So I think those things, the growth, you can be intentional about it, but it will, if we're offering good things for children, it will take care of themselves. If we're not, and this is where your attendance starts to fall off on things, and then so we don't consistently offer a program, maybe for a particular age level, and then people show up for it, and there's nobody there to run it. Well, they're not coming. There's a good chance they're not coming back.
Right.
So I think it's one of those things where we have to be strategic and intentional about what we're going to do. But when we say we're going to offer these programs, we got to be careful, because we can't do everything.
Right.
But what we say we're going to offer, we have to commit to offering it, whether 0 people show up or not.
And
we
keep
have
rolling.
to have some. If we got 0 people a week or 2, you can't just not show up the third. Have nobody show up the third week, because if you do, you're going to have people show up, and kids show up, and then it's not there. So.
Right. And so I agree with you. You start with one program and you build it, and you add to your programs one at a time. Because if you try to put all your eggs in the basket at one time, and you put too much in there, you overload it,
Yeah.
and then you suffer on one end or the other.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's exactly what I mean by that. Yeah.
And see, the other question is, how do we bridge the gap between generations? Because we got the older generation.
Stuff, but I I am more of a traditionalist in that sense because that's what I was conditioned to think that church is, and that's where I'm comfortable. There can be other flavors like Baskin Robbins.
Oh
There's
yeah.
no one way to serve the Lord, and there's no one, styles of music. These things shouldn't divide us. We just simply can't, we don't have the bandwidth to offer. Not everybody has the bandwidth to offer, but fortunately, the more appealing we are, the more people, and the more people that we bring in with different gifts that can use those gifts to minister to other people, we can all, that does increase our bandwidth to be able to do that. But I don't think there is such a I don't see it so much as a divide. It'd be certainly not an antagonistic one. I think there's I think the more younger people are around the older folks, the more we realize that they've lived. We're not the first people to go through what we went through, and I tell my children, I know it's so surprising to them that I understand what they're going through because I've been through it before, and it's that perspective that we know we have to offer our children. But in the same way, the older people really are the bedrock of this church, the future. But we also have to focus on the future of the church.
Right.
And I think we also have to look at what are the spiritual needs of our community. And I think the spiritual needs of our community, whether it's this church or another church or anything, we've got to get more parents in church. And I think it is through children's ministries, through youth ministries, that we can do that. And so, I know that when we weren't going to church as much during COVID, we still wanted our children to, we're really missing out on youth programs and Sunday schools, and that was a part of, we knew we hungered for their souls before we hungered for our own.
Right.
Really. So I think that's something that's common. I think we have, we've talked in prior episodes about, sort of there's a family breakdown that is corresponding to a lack of church attendance, among Gen X parents, and older millennial parents, I think that's, and I think let's serve the children, because we have a fairly good nucleus of either that are regularly attending or who are our members who would regularly attend youth programs, if we had those more. So.
Oh yeah. And so that's one thing. Another thing too with the younger generations, I think they don't really understand the traditions of the older church, and that's one thing me and Joe are trying to get to where we can teach the youth group that we have now, is what the kneeler is, why we do communion, why we do the baptisms the way we do. That way they can understand, this is why the traditions are held on so tight.
Yeah.
This is why we have those traditions. Because a lot of times you go to a church and those traditions aren't there.
Yeah. Well, Joe, I think I've known Joe I don't remember not knowing Joe, but I thought he was this magical person when I was a little child. And of course, he appeals to high school age kids as well. He'd been a teacher, for 50 years.
Oh yeah.
Joe is really a programming genius. That is very obviously his gift that he brings. So, we have. So I think the good news is we have the gifts to have that infrastructure in place and to build it out, because we have the talent to deliver. And I think some churches have the opposite problem where they have the dynamic young folks that are going to draw kids into church, but they don't. They might not have the ability to deliver on a programming
Right.
standpoint. So we've got that. I think it's up to us to go out and sell it.
Oh, yeah.
And to recruit our membership to use those gifts to and hopefully we can find some younger adults that are that are going to relate better to teenagers.
Oh, yeah.
I'm starting to feel aged out of that. I'm got my long plucking my eyebrows and my ears and things like that. I don't relate to children, to teenagers the same way I did when I was in my mid-20s. So I hope that we'll be able to attract some of those people to look through volunteerism and
Oh, yeah.
good programming and things like that. So
And so that's one reason me and Joe decided this year we're going to try to do a youth sunrise service. Is to kind of give an option, because the parents are going to come across the street to the we call it the older generation, sunrise service. Then we're going to have a youth one over on this side, and we want to try to get as many youth involved, even the age of your children that you have, because eventually those children are going to grow into.
my parents always went to sunrise service, and I never went because I was I'm a brick in the morning. Now that I'm getting older, we don't have as much melatonin our body makes. You got to get up. I wake up a lot easier in the morning than I did when I was a child.
Oh, yeah.
But my son, he is, he starts to wake up and he hears things going on outside, and he goes, "What fun am I missing out on?"
Oh, yeah.
So I think that's a wonderful idea that we can do, and that's something that probably is not offered. So hopefully we can broadcast that, hey, this is something that's special and unique that's going to be offered, that maybe will attract children from all over the community.
Oh, yeah. And see, this is the first time I've even heard of doing a youth sunrise service anywhere.
Yeah.
That I've heard of. But it's something that me and Joe were sitting there, and we were talking about Easter, and we were talking about not having youth on Easter, and because it's Easter Sunday and family spends a lot of time together. But we're like, we want to have something that we can do for the youth, and do it not for just our church, but bring the whole community in.
Yeah.
It's like we're also trying to find a way to get the youth involved with the older generations and do like barbecues and different style, things that we can draw everybody together as one unit.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I want to see if we can get our church back going with our family ministries team and get it booming like it was before, where we did a lot of family oriented events where you brought in the grandparents and you brought in the family, and because
I think to the extent that you have vibrant programs and you start developing vibrant classes, the class and groups, that there becomes some opportunity to show off what they're doing, and to celebrate that, and so that obviously is a draw. The cost. I'm an economist. The extra cost to go to church when you're delivering your children to church is pretty low already. So I just might as well stick around.
Well, it's actually cheaper.
Right. So you start going, well, it's cheaper. I don't have to leave and then come back.
Right.
I just have to throw on some clothes and sit there for a little while, and if we're able to show that it's enjoyable to be here and worthwhile to be here, then I think people will come back. And I think when we show that this is the house of the Lord,
Oh, yeah.
and the Lord's here, we don't have to have the great things. The Lord's already got the great things.
Oh, yeah.
And so we just got to figure out, that how we don't, to a certain extent, how we don't get in the way.
Right. Well, so we got to take ourselves out of it and put more, lead God in the front.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times, and me and my wife get into arguments about this all the time. She thinks that, churches, like a lot of churches, they still have God in front. And I'm like, if you look at a lot of them, they get greedy with money, they get greedy with power, with envy, it's a worldly thing.
That's the human condition. I mean,
Right.
that's the church is no different. We're made up of people that man fell a long time ago. Man was fallen a long time ago,
Right.
and since then we've all been born in sin.
That is true.
And so we're going to have, anytime you get together and you have a group, well, you need to have some leaders and you need to pull your resources. And anytime you need to pull your resources, there are people who become more operational around those things, and you're just going to have bureaucracy and the good things that people who know how to do what they're doing are with bureaucracy, and also then some of the downside that goes with that is some other people are just not as involved, and they become power dynamics because we're human. But I think to the extent that we can remind ourselves we're here to serve the Lord, and we have to love and forgive. God offers us grace before we deserved it. He offered it.
Oh, yeah.
The offer of grace is there all the time, and He expects us to model that. To those who are not walking in the flock, those who've never walked in the flock, and those who are walking in the flock and differently and maybe stumbling in ways that they don't see, or that we're being too judgmental about, or maybe we're being myopic about it. So I think we have to always keep those things, that humility in mind, and say, hey, at least we got people who are trying to serve the Lord, and this is a natural thing that can happen.
And I want to say I wasn't throwing any churches or anything under the bus.
It does, but it's
because even my personal condition, sometimes I put me before I put God, or I put, well, I need this before I put God. And it's not just the church; it's human nature, humankind. That's kind of
we can't,
it's that weakness we have.
The weird thing is that we act surprised and disappointed. I mean, I guess it's okay to be disappointed, but it is predictable almost with certainty that this is going to happen, and because this always happens whenever there are groups that are organized in any way.
Oh yeah.
So that always happens. The question is, how do we respond to it?
Right.
And if we respond to it with grace and awareness and humility, and we encourage that in our leaders, and we encourage that gratefulness on behalf of those that aren't serving as leaders right now, and understanding and grace of our leaders, we'll proceed better, and without bitterness. I think.
I agree with you on that. To me, it's the love, peace, grace, and you said one of the words to me is the most important is humility.
Yeah.
We have to humble ourselves down before we can expect the wholeness to follow through to other people.
Yeah, and there's a kind of a big elephant in the room that you and I talked about before, that that our church is facing. Other denominations have faced that, and it's something that's going on in the world, and we have to deal with it, and it's been something that people are afraid to speak about.
Right.
And afraid we don't want to offend people, afraid because we don't want to face societal wrath, afraid because we don't want to misspeak for the Lord. After all, we talk about our church, and this is our local church. It's not our house.
No.
This is the house of the Lord. We are here to serve the Lord. And so there is a division kind of going on over the issues of gay marriage and gay clergy. And it's an honest theological disagreement about interpretation, and that we're not, there have been schisms all throughout history. I don't think of Catholics as any less Christian. I don't think of Baptists as any less Christian. But they have different interpretations on different issues. But we all belong to God's church,
Right.
and we're here as a church to serve God's will. And I'm afraid to speak on it, because if I'm wrong, I am either consecrating something that God does not want to be consecrated, giving his seal of approval to a behavior that he does. Either I'm doing that, or I am telling a child of God that he or she may not serve the Lord in an official capacity in his house. I do not feel comfortable enough to know that. I pray for that. And if I don't feel comfortable enough, I hope that people understand that. I understand that people are going to get mad hearing that. But the thing is, it's not the main thing. It is not the main tenet of Christianity. We are, regardless of how you interpret that, and how we interpret it as a congregation, we're not all going to agree on it.
Right.
All congregations are not going to agree. They are still everyone is still our brother and sister, a sacred child of God with a soul.
Oh yeah.
And we better love them, not conditional upon an interpretation on that issue. This is not our house. And so I think that is something that's very important. Yet at the same time, it is distracting our ministry. It is distracting the ministries of all churches. And some are leaning more one way or the other. And we're not serving the main needs of bringing God's message of love and grace to the world as effectively as we could, because of this distraction and this division that the world is saying these people can't even get their house in order. It's not our house. There can be honest disagreement about issues like this. Perhaps it is best for our ministry. I mean, there are practical reasons that make it difficult, if you believe one way or the other, to accept the other interpretation about who can officially serve the Lord, what can be consecrated and what cannot. There are practical reasons why maybe ministries need to diverge, but we're still serving the same God. We're still brothers and sisters. We're still going to be part of the universal church of the Lord, and no matter what. But we're going to have to, we can't ignore it. We can't talk about it in uncertain terms. We just have to pray that we move forward in a way that serves the Lord, and that if it does end up in division, that it is not one of bitterness, but it is one of grace, and one that will ultimately serve the Lord to be able to minister more effectively to all of his children.
And I'll go ahead and tell you, I've always, and I hope it don't get me in trouble, but I want to say it, and we might disagree on it, but I don't agree with homosexual clergy or homosexual marriage. But it's because in the Bible it says man shall not lay with man, and it's an interpretation.
It is an interpretation, and I've heard what could be viable different interpretations, not just of that scripture, but of different scriptures from the original things, whether they were in Aramaic, Hebrew, or Greek. and how they were written, or whether the focus was on homosexuality or whether the focus was on orgies, which were common in ancient Greek culture and things like that. So, and Roman culture as well. So I'm not. I think we can get ourselves distracted from that.
Right.
That doesn't divide me and you.
And so that's one thing.
You know that I don't know where I'd agree or disagree. I have too much trepidation to speak for the Lord, because
Right.
you, one way or the other, you ultimately are having to make that stand. And I think there should be a place for all people to serve the Lord. But maybe not everywhere. And so I respect both theological conclusions. My bigger concern is that we don't distract ourselves from our missions as churches, and that we fulfill our missions as churches, and that we move forward. However we move forward with love and clarity of mission.
Right. And that's one thing me and David and Joe were talking about one time, was a lot of times we get the monkey wrench thrown in, like what we're dealing with now. And sometimes it's almost like we forget why we're actually here. It's like when Ukraine, the war started with Ukraine and Russia. You notice that everything got pushed to the side except for Ukraine and Russia. Why do we wait for the bad things to happen before we start actually focusing on what our true mission is?
Right. That's right. I mean, it's because we're human, and we sometimes, there's another famous slap in the face that happened this week.
Oh yeah.
And more people heard about that slap in the face that cared all about what went on at that award show. But sometimes we're human. We need a slap in the face to go, wait a minute, we should pay attention to this, or wait a minute, that's a distraction. We need to focus on this.
Oh yeah.
And regardless of what it is, it's a wake-up call.
That it is.
So I hope that this is a wake-up call to focus on the main thing, and to keep the main thing the main thing. It's not our house, it's the house of the Lord. We should love our God, the Lord our God, with all our hearts and minds and bodies and spirits and souls and works and everything that we can do. And one of the major ways that we do that is by doing the second thing, and loving the neighbor with all is best, in serving our neighbors as best as we possibly can. And we have to see their humanity. To do that, we have to see their humanity, that they are struggling the same way that we are, and with sin, and we are not without sin, and they're trying to move forward the best that we are. And hopefully we can all serve the Lord better and follow the Lord better as Christians, with less distraction, with less internal tribalism,
Right.
things like that.
Right. Well, we have actually run out of time. Or we usually have a 30-minute window we go for,
Okay.
and we're at 35. So,
Well, that's good.
but we're gonna say, have a blessed week, and hope to see y'all Sunday in church.